Hello, everybody, and welcome to your Ruby Live event. My name is Eric Wynkoop, and I'm the Director of Culinary Instruction. And I'm also one of your instructors in the courses, along with the other members on the instructional team. And I want to welcome all of you today to my office hours. This is your opportunity to ask questions that are related to food and cooking, and I'll do my best to respond to them. And I've got just a couple of items that I'd like to mention before I get started. And the first one is, if you'd like to participate a little more directly, please feel free to enter a question or a comment in the dialog box on the right-hand side of your page, the upper right-hand side, and that'll make its way to the queue, which is also on the right-hand side of the page. And also, as you look at the individual questions that are already entered, you'll notice a heart-shaped icon. If you would like that particular question answered sooner than later, go ahead and click on that icon, and it'll bump that question up in priority. Okay? Otherwise, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and jump on in here. And the first question is from Nancy, who asks, how do you learn to flip or rotate food in a fry pan like chefs do? Do you start with a certain amount or size? Do you practice with cold food? And so a good way to practice the flipping technique is to get the pan that you intend to use. And maybe there are multiple pans, but use a pan that's suitable for sauteing, meaning that it has relatively shallow sides. Okay. If you use a pan that has sloped sides, that will be easiest. That facilitates this rotation or flipping process. You've got also pans that have straight sides, and it's not impossible to flip food, but it's certainly more challenging. So as you start out, especially, I recommend using a pan with sloped sides. And get a slice of bread. And so a cold pan, cold slice of bread, and you're going to move the pan forward and give your wrist a flip and sort of move in this rotational manner with your arm and your wrist. And you're going to try to flip the edge of the bread that's farthest from you up and towards you. Okay. And then let that, you'll put this, the pan at an angle to allow the slice of bread to slide away from you. And then you're going to flip it over. Okay. And then repeat that process as much as you need to. And I would say at least 100 times to get started, but, otherwise as much as you need to find a rhythm. Okay. Where you're getting that, the pan to move in this rotational manner with the wrist that sort of promotes this flipping action. And you're going to watch that bread flip over once with each rotation of the pan. Okay. Once you do that about 100 times, then graduate to beans, some sort of legume, or grains in their uncooked form. And just put a handful in there. Maybe that's a quarter cup, maybe it's a third of a cup, something like that. The amount can vary, and give that a try as well. Okay. And, your goal is to keep all those beans or grains in the pan. All right. And just keep practicing that until you maintain this rhythm. You're going to see a flow of beans and grains, like a wave coming in toward the coast for the surfers. Okay. And it's a beautiful thing. And once you get some confidence and that rhythm down, and develop some muscle memory, then go ahead and move on to some food that you're actually cooking. Okay. And keep in mind that lubrication in the form of oil of some sort will make things easier for you, but that's not a requirement. It just makes it easier. Give that a try, and I think you're going to be just fine. Okay, thank you, Nancy. And the next question is from Catherine, okay, who asks, what herbs or spices make up a shawarma blend? What can be used as a substitute? So I'll begin by saying that, as we consider these spice blends, herb blends that are used for particular dishes or that might characterize a flavor of a certain region or a certain type of cuisine, that there is rarely, if ever, a set recipe or a standard that must be adhered to. Okay, there are going to be variations. In other words, one cook does it one way, another cook doesn't like quite so much black pepper and changes up the recipe a little bit, but still maintaining the overall flavor of that village or city or that region, and characterizing the cuisine that those two cooks are making. Okay, so please, understand that larger context. Allow some fluidity, in your cooking. Don't be rigid, in other words, in terms of adhering to a recipe, because that's not so important at the end of the day. Okay. Generally speaking, shawarma is going to be characterized by spices, such as cinnamon and cardamom, cumin and coriander, as well as ginger powder and turmeric. And, there's usually some sort of a ground chili, a red chili powder that's included. You can adjust the heat. It could be a more mild paprika. It could be a moderate heat Aleppo chili, or it could be a much more intense heat from, let's say, cayenne. Um, and those ratios vary. Okay, you feel free to look up a more specific recipe to get started with. And again, be aware that you might find the addition or omission of spices from what I just mentioned. Okay, but that'll get you, in that realm of flavors that are common to the Middle East, and as we follow the migration routes of the people that have come from that part of the world, those are the flavors and profiles that you're going to find. All right, thank you. All right, next question is from Bill. Nice to see you again, Bill. The question is, can you suggest substitutes for oil when cooking casseroles and other dishes that call for oil? So this is an interesting question in that it's really going to depend uh, on you mentioned casseroles, and I guess I would ask, I would wonder just how the oil is functioning in that recipe. That's really what we're after here. Okay, so sometimes simply omitting the oil is quite fine. Other times the use of water or some other water-based liquid is going to be a suitable substitute. It could be vinegar, it could be wine, it could be apple juice. Again, it could just be water to provide moisture, to provide lubrication. Understand that if we use flavored liquids, that we need to be aware of what sort of flavor is being added as we make a substitution like this. Okay. And then other times, again, this is going to depend upon on you, Bill, or other cooks, and how strict they need to be around the use of oil. But also consider reducing the amount of oil and see if you can find results that are what you're expecting, or at least in that realm. I'll take a little tangent and say that whenever we make changes to an ingredient or a couple of ingredients, that we should expect changes in the result. That makes sense, right? So as we change from oil to water or reduce the oil to a smaller amount, we should expect some changes in the finished dish. Changes are not a bad thing. Sometimes we like them better right off the bat. Sometimes it takes some time to get used to them as our palate and our brain makes the adjustment. And other times it'll take some experimentation on our part to find some sort of a balance that will work best for us. Okay. Um, Now, another thing that I'll offer you, Bill, is that if you have specific questions about a particular, preparation with a list of ingredients that you want to investigate together, please reach out to me at support@rouxbe.com, and we can look at an example, on a case by case sort of a basis. That could be more beneficial to you as you learn to navigate this space of ingredient substitutions. Thank you. All right. And the next question starts with a plea, I think. Help. How do I get Zabaglione to be light and fluffy without whipped cream? Mine is thick with no volume. Okay. So, um, Zabaglione is the Italian word for sabayon, and what we're looking at here is aeration with a whisk. That's going to be key, okay? And um, you can use you consider increasing the egg whites from whatever you might be doing at this point. Egg whites more than egg yolks will hold air. And so as you're whisking, you're going to realize more volume. Okay. And I'm not saying, replace necessarily, I'm not saying replace egg yolks with egg whites, but you can increase that ratio with additional egg white and you should see some difference. All right. Thank you. And the next question from Andrea says, what's the best way to prepare mushrooms? Well, the best way is going to be whatever you like best. And, you can apply any cooking method to mushrooms, just depending on what sort of an effect that you want. Mushrooms can be grilled, they can be sauteed, they can be, even roasted in the oven, although um, they do get dry and wrinkly in appearance, but again, that's going to depend upon how you use that product, and whether that's let's say a good thing or not. Okay. Um, if you want a little bit of crispiness around the edges and a little more firmness to the texture, you might want to draw some water out through a roasting process, for example. Okay. Um, Mushrooms, they vary in their water content. And so you can, in a saute pan, you can draw out some of that moisture through a longer cooking process. Um, and a big part of a lot of our mainstream mushrooms, such as your white mushrooms, these what we call button mushrooms very often, or creminis, these smaller brown mushrooms. What's important is to add flavor to them, and so this is where you might think about herbs and spices as well as members of the allium extended family, and so garlic and onions and shallots and scallions, these sorts of things can enhance or otherwise go very well with the flavor of mushrooms, but it just depends on what you like. And so I suggest that you just give it a try and go down this path of self-discovery. I think you'll learn a lot from that. Thank you. And it looks like we have a follow-up question about mushroom handling. Is it okay to eat raw mushrooms? Generally it is, but there are some folks that experience a little fuzzy feeling on the tongue when they eat mushrooms. And if that's the case, try to cook them and see if that changes for you, or avoid them. But many mushrooms, at least in my experience, are certainly edible raw. Now, from a texture standpoint, you might prefer to apply some heat to them, to cook them in some fashion. Okay, so again, give that a try and see how you like it. Okay, and what's the best and easy way to clean them? So there are different ways to clean mushrooms. So the best way is going to be the way that you like. You can use a brush and remove any debris, especially if we go foraging. It's common to use a small brush to remove moss or pine needles or other things that might be adhering to the mushrooms. I mean, otherwise, to run them under a gentle stream of cold water while you gently, use your fingers or a brush to remove debris, especially if it's really adhering to the mushrooms, can be a good way to do that. And some mushrooms will begin to discolor. In which case it might be good to just plan to use them immediately. Others don't discolor, in which case you might want to set them aside to dry out nicely if you plan to hold them for a while. Okay, but give these methods a try and see what works best for you. You might choose to use one or even both, depending on the situation. Thanks. Next, we have another question from Catherine. I've heard master chefs say not to rinse mushrooms. Plus, I've heard master chefs say it's actually okay and recommend washing organic. Thoughts? Yeah, I think I just answered this question. Um, Give it a try. Both using a brush on a dry mushroom and gently cleaning a mushroom under a gentle stream of cold water is effective. Chefs have personal preferences, and very often you will hear chefs, whoever they might be, wherever they might be, espouse a single way to do it because they think it's the best way. And I suggest giving multiple ways a try and test the results yourself. Okay. There often is absolutely nothing wrong with applying water to mushrooms to help clean them. All right. Thank you. And Felipe asks, how do you plan your week for shopping and cooking ahead of time? Okay, so this gets us into menu planning and even the concept of batch cooking, depending on just how much prep we want to do ahead of time. But take a look at what you want to eat, and I like to write things down so I can actually see what the plan is as it unfolds. And this is a time when you might just write down uh, you know Monday through Sunday and start to write down ideas of what you would like to eat. Keep in mind that it's a good idea to plan days that are back to back. Let's say a Monday and a Tuesday. With a meal on Monday, um, the, the leftovers of which could be used on Tuesday if transformed into something else, or the the same ingredients used on that Monday meal. If you have some left over, which is often the case, that they can be used on Tuesday to create a different meal, something new. Okay, so this way we minimize certainly, but even eliminate the waste of certain products. Okay, and I think that objective is going to be an important one from day to day and week to week. And then plan your shopping accordingly. And you might choose, one day or 2 days a week to go shopping, whatever's convenient for you. It could be more or less, frequency. And you do understand that different vegetables have different shelf lives, and some of them will last for a week, no problem. Others, might be looking a little rough around the edges on day 5, 6, or 7. And other things you might want to, buy twice a week because they have only a 2 or 3 day shelf life, or just use it up within a couple 3 days and then not have that in your inventory for the remainder of the week. So these are different considerations on your part. Okay. Um, and I think that's a place to start. Give that a try. See how you can develop a rhythm from week to week. You might also, at least to start with, consider what we would call a rotation menu, where you know um, Monday through Sunday, you have this set of dishes that you prepare, and then the following week you sort of repeat that theme, or you have the same sort of basic ideas in mind Monday through Sunday, keeping in mind that you can always start to alter spices and herbs and even primary and secondary ingredients to create variations on that dish, so that you're not actually eating the exact same thing every Monday through the year. Okay. And this is the way we start to cook. And cooking becomes more organic and spontaneous and creative, and also more relaxed, through this joyous process. All right. Give that a try. Thank you. All right. And the next question says, is the gray powdery debris remaining when using a honing rod from the knife or the honing rod? What is the material? Metal? Is it toxic if it gets into the food? So the material is going to be metal, and it's going to be a little bit of your knife as well as the honing rod. And you'll notice that over time, the honing rod will need to be replaced. And usually that's after some number of years. And it could be many, many years, but it'll eventually get smooth. And and that's going to be true of your knife as well as it begins to dull. And that's not only from the use of the knife, but to some degree in the maintenance, the daily maintenance process of using a steel, a honing rod. Is it toxic? This is an interesting question. It's kind of a fun question for me. A lot of things can be consumed, and if they're in very small amounts or balanced in some way, they don't cause any problem. I would say, this sort of a metallic powdery substance, I don't recommend eating it. If I always wipe off my steel as well as my knife before I use it after this maintenance process, and I recommend that you do that too. If some of this is on your fingertips or on your knife blade and gets into your food a little bit, um, for most people, most of the time, it's not going to be an issue. If you make it a habit of seeking this out to eat, it could be an issue. But that's going to be true of eating carrots and other things too. If you eat them out of balance, they're not good for you. And if you don't consider it to be food, then do your best to avoid it. And I think that's probably a good way to move forward. All right. Thank you. All right. And the next question from Marilyn. What are good fillings for sandwiches, which my husband loves, besides hummus? Um, let's think of other sort of moist spread-like items, such as pesto or tapenade, which is an olive paste, or a coarse paste. These are things that can add flavor and, importantly, moisture to a sandwich. They are often not the primary filling, okay, of the sandwich. Hummus could be, or it could be a secondary, just a moisture and flavor lending ingredient for the sandwich. Also, consider other bean purees or bean spreads in the spirit of hummus. Also, consider adding herbs or spices to hummus to create many different varieties. And one thing that I like to do is add Indian pickles to hummus, to blend that in to create something very tasty. And so you can have a lot of variety from just a single ingredient like hummus. Okay. Also consider other things like roasted vegetables or grilled vegetables, sauteed vegetables, whatever it is that you like. Those things can go into a sandwich to create a very nice filling, along with hummus or pesto or tapenade or something else. Okay. And go down this path and give that a try, and you're bound to think of other things as well. Thank you. All right, and the next question is from Cynthia. In regards to eating foods raw, Oats and oatmeal. One, should you always rinse the oats off before cooking? Two, is it safe to eat raw rolled oats? I love them alone, mixed with fruits, etc., or cold cereal. Cereal. I've seen conflicting viewpoints. Thank you. So, question number one. Um, should you always rinse oats off before cooking? When I use whole oat groats, so in other words, the whole grain, I will rinse them as I do any whole grains that I cook with. If I'm using a processed form of oats, such as cut or rolled oats, then I don't rinse them. I don't think it's necessary to do that. But give it a try both ways and see what works for you. Okay, what you might prefer. Okay, I would say certainly if it's a rolled oat, there's no need to rinse that. That becomes a little bit cumbersome at that point. Again, unless you have a specific reason, why you want to do that, then of course feel free to do that. Number two, is it safe to eat raw rolled oats? This is probably an issue or a question that will depend on the person. The overarching question for me from a culinary standpoint is its edibility, right? In other words, how pleasant is it to eat? And sounds like you love them, in which case, consider eating them. If you have, no GI distress and your stool is well formed, then you're probably okay. But if you find some imbalance in the gut that you might attribute to the raw oats that you're eating, then consider cutting back on the frequency or quantity, or cut that item out of your diet entirely in its raw form. Okay. I think those are sort of ways, regardless of the food item, whether it's a raw oat or something else, that we all should be paying attention to figure out whether it's good for us or not. In other words, pay attention to how our body is reacting to these things. Okay, and the first one, of course, is just the gut state. Do we get a stomach ache? Do we have excess flatulence? Again, take a look at your stool. Um, uh, I'll talk about poop. Okay, it's the other end of the cooking spectrum, and it's important. What we're looking for is well-formed stool as consistently as we can, and that's an ideal. Depending on our body type, that can vary from person to person. Some people have a greater propensity to have hard stool, others a very wet stool. But to take a look at what is consistent for you, keeping in mind that, ideally, a well-formed stool would be the target. Okay, but again, this can vary from person to person. All right. Um, and moving on, okay, to the next question from Margot. Hello, Margot. Welcome. Could you possibly recommend a few innovative Japanese and Indian plant-based chefs? I love those cuisines, and quite a few French friends are eager for me to cook anything but French food. The noodles and world unit were much appreciated. Excellent. Okay, thank you for that feedback, Margot. There are many folks out there, in this realm, and I'm not necessarily up to speed on many of them, I'll say, but a couple of names come to mind. And there's an Indian woman, or certainly of Indian origin. Her name is Romy Gills, Gill. Gill, and she, I believe, is London-based, or at least was, and she has some ties to New York as well. But she is someone to take a look at. So Romy Gill. There's also a chef in Tokyo by the name of Kusumoto. Kusumoto, Kusumoto, and he's got a restaurant in Tokyo. He's gotten some traction over the last few years, and he might be a person that you follow to see what he is up to. He's got some beautiful food that I've seen. There are others, but those are a couple to start with. Thank you. And the next question, or let's see, a comment here from Don says, I've been a vegan since I first watched Forks Over Knives last, and that was in January 2012. My wife passed in February 2020. I know hardly anything about cooking, but I am 80 and going to become what I need to be to feed myself and anyone who needs help. Don, first, I want to convey my condolences. And it sounds like your wife was the primary cook in the house, and you are taking over, and you are working on filling some big shoes in terms of cooking for yourself now. And you've been a vegan since 2012. Yeah, Forks Over Knives came out in 2011, so you were right on it, and I want to commend you for that. That was definitely a big time. A lot of important discussion was stored up at that point in time, about 10 years ago or more. And yeah, I mean, I commend you for your spirit, and I wish you the best. As you continue down this path, if you have any questions about cooking, I welcome you to reach out at support@rouxbe.com, and I'd be happy to answer your questions. Happy cooking to you. Thank you. And the next question from Carrie, hello, is PB Fit a viable alternative to peanut butter on a whole food plant-based eating plan? It's not a whole food, but seems low in fat and sugar. Why is peanut butter so high in fat anyways? Do companies add oil? I'm talking like Smucker's peanut butter, not Jif style. Okay, so PB Fit for our audience today is a brand name, and of a product that is sometimes called defatted peanut flour. And there are other brands that market the same sort of a thing. Okay, so PB Fit is the brand name. And so generally speaking, this sort of peanut powder or peanut flour that you'll find out there is a byproduct of the peanut oil extraction process and industry. Okay. And once upon a time, this sort of byproduct would have been fed to pigs. Instead, today they're marketed to humans. And it's a product that has gained traction because it is relatively low in fat when compared to whole peanut butter. Okay, so is it something to be used on a whole food plant-based eating plan? That's going to be up to you. I think in a way you may have answered your question, Carrie, in your next line by saying that it's not a whole food. But these sort of questions I leave to the individual. Okay, I personally prefer whole peanut butter, and just in moderation to kind of keep the fat balanced. But if you find a place and a reason to eat the defatted version of peanut butter, then give that a try. Okay. And as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, everything in moderation, right? Not too much of anything, even if it seems to be a good thing, because that would be out of balance. So on to your other questions here. Why is peanut butter so high in fat? Peanuts just contain a lot of oil, just a lot of fat. And so they provide a lot of calories. That's part of the context of that whole food, like other nuts as well. Okay. And so we would generally recommend, right, that most people most of the time consume, things like whole walnuts and peanuts and other, oil-rich seeds and nuts in relatively small quantities. Okay. If you know that you're health situation is different in a specific way, then you might choose to do something different. Okay. Um, and do companies add oil? I can't speak for any companies. You need to reach out to them specifically to ask that question. Okay, because I'm sure every company has a different formula on how they handle things, including very simply grinding peanuts. All right, thank you. All right, next up, another question from Catherine, who writes, when creating a vegan egg for baking, I've been told two different things: a tablespoon chia seeds or ground flaxseed to 3 tablespoons of water, or is it 1 tablespoon of chia seeds or flaxseed to 2 tablespoons of water? Which is correct. They're both correct, and as is 2.5 tablespoons of water. Um, it just depends, and you have the ability to adjust the liquid, in this sort of a formula. I'll say, depending on the application and the desired outcome. Initially, I would say follow the recipe. You're going to find recipes that call for 3 tablespoons, 2.5 tablespoons, or even 2 tablespoons of water to the 1 tablespoon of dry flax or chia. Okay. There's not a wrong answer. This is part of cooking. There are different ways to approach a situation. And if you get to the point, and perhaps you're there right now, of designing your own baking formulas, then you'll need to test the moisture content and how much water you want to mix with your dried chia or flax. Okay, so there's not a single answer out there. That's the beauty of cooking and baking as well, right? As the more you learn, the more control you have to make alterations to recipes and formulas. And even something like this can vary. All right, so follow the formula first until you understand what's going on, and then start to make some changes yourself. Thank you. All right, next question is from Irene. Can you substitute commercially made vegan cheese in recipes that call for cheese? Is there a good brand? I mean, generally you can, and these plant-based cheeses, they act and react in the face of heat in very different ways. And so it depends on what you're doing, what you're making. Okay. It's going to require a little bit of testing, a little bit of experimentation, a little bit of trial and error, whatever you want to call it. I call it the joy of cooking and discovery and good eats. But there are many brands out there, and again, depends on what it is you're trying to achieve. One you might consider is Miyoko's brand. And this is a popular brand nationwide. And Miyoko's produces a number of different plant-based products. And so you can sort of pick and choose for different applications. All right, give it a try. Thank you. And Catherine's back. Another question. When I was stationed in Okinawa with the United States Navy, the native women would spend hours gathering a very fine seaweed, which they used in cooking. I don't know the name of it or where to find it. I can say it was extremely flavorful. Do you have any idea? Um, I'm not sure. There are many varieties of seaweed, eaten in Okinawa, and uh, which one you experienced, I'm not sure of, but there's a popular variety is called mozuku. Perhaps that rings a bell. There's also a cousin to mozuku called ito mozuku, and these are a couple of them that come to mind. Other than that, give Dr. Google a call and see if you might find something online. Thank you. All right. And the next question from Catherine. There's a theme here. What blend of herbs could I use to replace savory? Okay. So there are a couple of variations or varieties, I should say, species of savory, a summer and a winter, and you know they share some basic characteristics in their sort of peppery mintiness, um, and so you know in terms of a substitution for that, you know, think about herbs that offer a peppery, minty profile. And so you've got thyme and you know marjoram, even mint. There are different varieties of mint out there, but one of those or a combination of those could get you there. Okay, and as always, you know, keep in mind that when making ingredient substitutions, um, the finished product is going to be different. Okay, but you can bring in some, you know, similar elements, you know, in terms of the aroma and flavor from these herbs that I mentioned. All right, thank you. And Karen is asking, what are some ways to prepare tofu? Um, well, let's see here. You could uh, cut it into small cubes and add it to your soup. And you could slice a brick of tofu into slabs and bake it. You can season it and then bake it to push off some of the moisture. And that'll create a more dense, meaty like texture that you can then use. You know, at that point, you can put on the plate with your other foods, other vegetables, and grains that you might be enjoying. Um, I mean, those are a couple that come to mind. You know, use medium firmness and firmer style tofus for the two examples that I just mentioned. You know, you can also uh, get tofu like a medium firmness tofu, cut it into large cubes, and just simmer it for a few minutes to heat it through, and then drain the water, and then sprinkle it with some soy sauce, maybe some grated ginger, and then enjoy it very simply, you know, as a side dish in that form. And then you can, you know, also enjoy more delicate versions uh, cold with a drizzle of soy sauce. Again, maybe some grated ginger, you know, as a side dish. Okay, so those are a few ways that you might enjoy tofu, but there are many, many others that I'm sure you'll find online if you check it out. Thank you. All right. Hello, Catherine. On the recipes we make, which we're graded on, is it okay to substitute some of the ingredients? Example, leave out chilies during the cooking and let folks add sriracha or hot sauce if they wish during the meal. Will we lose points? So I'm going to answer this question in a couple of ways. So if you make substitutions, it should not alter the learning outcome, okay, of that activity. And if you're not sure, just send us a message at support@rouxbe.com and we can take a look at that specific example, okay? And then we can do some brainstorming on what might be the most suitable substitution or options for your situation, okay? So substitutions are okay as long as they don't alter the learning outcome, in which case you might lose points, or we may just ask you to redo the assignment if the learning outcome wasn't met, okay? Because we're not able to critique your work at that point. If it is a secondary or tertiary ingredient in the dish, like a dipping sauce or a garnish of chilies, then that is not a problem to put the chilies on the side or put them on the side in the form of a hot sauce. Okay, so I hope that's helpful to you. Again, if you have any questions, about the learning outcome and what certain alteration might mean, then reach out to us directly beforehand. Thank you. And next question from Marilyn. What's a good substitute for mayo? I bought a low-fat one and it has no flavor. Okay, so we've got a couple things going here. I'll first mention that mayonnaise is mostly fat. It's mostly oil. And so if we make, and that oil, well, it conveys a lot of flavor, okay, via the other ingredients that you might use when you make the mayonnaise. And then certainly if you're using something like olive oil, the oil itself will provide flavor, okay? So as we think about a low-fat mayonnaise, then we're taking away a lot of that spirit, okay, of mayonnaise. And yes, it doesn't surprise me that you might have stumbled upon an example that lacked flavor. Okay. Um, so what's a good substitute for mayo? So there are plant-based versions of mayo out there, and Sir Kensington, I'll drop a name here, is a brand that I find to be relatively tasty in the plant-based mayo spread world. Give that a try. It's a full fat item though. Okay, but it's got some other things going. If you come across a version that is low in fat, then jazz it up yourself. Add some lemon juice, some salt is in other words a source of acid, and then salt are going to be the places to start. And then beyond that, you can add other flavorful things. Okay, according to your preference. Mustard of any sort is a good ingredient to add, at least according to me. And as I mentioned earlier, I like to add Indian pickles because they add so much flavor to just about anything. And mayonnaise would certainly be a good foundation for experimentation with those pickles. Okay, and try to create something that you like. That's probably the best way for you to be satisfied. All right, give that a try. Thank you. And lastly, from Nancy. I love sheet pan meals, but they usually require dousing in oil, which I avoid for health reasons. Is there an alternative to oil and temperature adjustments? Well, certainly as we're roasting vegetables and anything, we can eliminate the oil and use a flavorful water-based liquid. Okay, and that's something that we teach in our oil-free cooking lessons. And it's going to require a little more hands-on attention, where at multiple points midstream to the cooking process, you will want to turn or rotate that food product for even browning. Okay, and also understand that the roasting process with oil also develops flavor in a certain way. So if you're eliminating oil, then you might want to consider adding flavor. I always think about spices. Herbs are a great way to do this, as well as herb or spice blends. And even other condiments. I mentioned mustard a couple minutes ago as being a nice place to start to add flavor to many preparations, whether it's a bland mayonnaise or maybe a soup. In this case, a sheet pan meal that is lightly tossed in mustard or some other condiment could add the flavor that you're looking for without the oil. An alternative, again, depending on your situation, is to simply reduce the amount of oil. So you're cutting back on the ill effects of oil, or the too much oil in your diet, but still getting some of the benefits of the oil from a culinary or cooking perspective. Okay, so there's some different ways to problem solve here, and I hope that you'll give these a try and find that way forward that works best for you. All right, and this brings to conclusion the list of questions and my office hours today. I look forward to seeing all of you again. And in the meantime, happy cooking.